Welcome back, and thank you very much for staying with us today. Again, joining us for a very interesting panel discussion from industry leaders, giving very different perspective from the supply chain, the distribution outlets, and the repair functions of the aftermarket. So again, today we have Ezer Mevorach, Michael Macaluso, and Steve Gushie joining myself and Susan Hitchon for a conversation about what their thoughts are on the state of the automotive aftermarket in Canada. So without further ado, Susan, I guess I'll leave you with the first question for the panel.
Thank you, JF. And I'll just say to the folks watching that the number of topics that we wanted to discuss was vast, and we had to narrow it down to just a few. So there are so many interesting challenges and opportunities in our industry that we did have to narrow it down to a few. And our first topic is about e-commerce in 2020, 2021. And I'll address this to Steve. We, of course, seen a rapid change in consumer habits in the last year. How is e-commerce impacting the aftermarket distribution network in your view?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody today. It's amazing what's happened in the last 14 months, and you get the understanding that you get to pull a jacket out of the closet and find out it shrunk over that period of time somehow mysteriously. So e-commerce has really grown over the last 14 months for us, and I'm sure everybody in the aftermarket, but it's really changed more rapidly. And what I mean by that is that, 14 months ago, when nobody ever heard of the curbside, and now we're living that every day in our industry. So it's kind of progressed where we're heading with e-commerce and kind of sped it up exponentially. I had one of my colleagues that used to kind of kid around and said, hey, the internet is just a fad, don't worry about it. But the reality is that it's coming to us faster and faster. And some of the things that we used to think about, which was a disruptor in our industry, like Lyft or Uber, have themselves been disrupted by the pandemic. Consumers are thinking about, where am I going to take my car to get it repaired? Am I going to be safe? And so even the repair facilities themselves are figuring ways to have contactless service to the consumer, whether that is a text message or a phone call, that type of thing. But the disruptors themselves is that the consumers, they don't want to be in public transportation. They really want their vehicle back by 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So e-commerce has been huge for the industry because it's sped up. In ways of that is give me the keys back by 5 o'clock. I need to have access to inventory. So if you think about where we were before with this, is now we've had to expand that out. So you get customers looking at online at the store inventories. And when you go from the store inventories, then you can go to, say, a cluster of stores in that marketplace, or from the cluster of stores out to a hub, or even from the hub to the distribution center itself, all giving immense access to inventory so the consumer can see, or the potential parts person could see where the inventory is and get it to that point of installation quickest. So again, the consumer gets their keys back, and that's all kind of part of the value chain. If you think about it from the likes of people like Amazon, when you go online at Amazon, you don't know whether it's at the distribution center or not. You're just making a choice based on availability and when it's going to come to you. Where it's coming from, you really don't know, but you're getting it. And that's kind of what's moved on. With e-commerce, I think some of the other things that are happening inside of there is now the customer is inside your ecosystem. So now you're able to serve up things like MSDS sheets for them. You're able to serve up images of parts so they can identify something to it. You can give them warranty information. You can give them torque specifications. And also the opportunities so that it can kind of be integrated right into the shop management system. So the last 14 months have kind of driven our customer base into those kind of ecosystems where they're finding out that there's a lot of information. It makes their job go easier, and it's contactless as well. So we're seeing more and more of that driven up today. I think Ezer has some points on this as well.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. And nice to be with everyone today. Appreciate the invite. I do believe that COVID, for sure, the past year has accelerated the transformation of business and how we conduct business, everything that Steve just pointed to. Ease of doing business is it's going to be a lot easier. There's a lot more transparency for consumers, for techs to see into our world. And I think enriched data is going to be a huge contributor to this transformation. I know for us working with distributors, there's a lot more focus now on providing. Data was always king, was always critical, but now it's enriched data is really where it's at. We have a much more educated consumer, obviously, and that's a huge change and a good thing for our industry. And we have the opportunity to further educate technicians, consumers via the internet and all the platforms that are provided. Not to mention, last point maybe is just the efficiency and the speed to market in terms of distributor to consumer and tech shop.
Question, Michael, I'm curious because, we've given a bit of perspective from the supply chain, but obviously you're dealing much more from a consumer perspective, and that interaction with the consumer combined with the acceleration of e-commerce, how's that impacting this old B2C type of environment?
Yeah, really appreciate the question. And as my colleagues here, certainly appreciate being here to share kind of our experience. What I think from the e-commerce side of things in the entire kind of digital transformation, really, everything going to smartphones and whatnot, what's especially happened over the course of the past 14 months is the pace of change has certainly accelerated. And if I look at referencing our business, particularly on the collision and glass side of things, we've had to adapt and bring new solutions forward far quicker than we ever imagined, which has actually been great for the business and great for the consumer. So as that consumer acquires different things through the more traditional e-commerce platforms for shopping and groceries and things like that, that expectation for e-commerce now goes throughout their entire buying habits. And going to the consumer point within the automotive aftermarket within our business is no different. So we've had to certainly accelerate a lot of technologies to adapt to that quicker pace of change, which has been really, really good for our industry. And I'll give one great example is we have something called photo-based estimating, where no longer do you have to go to a body shop or the collision center to actually start your process of the claims process. It can all be done from your mobile phone, digitized to enhance that customer experience, reduce the points of entry into a retail facility. And what we've also seen with the whole e-commerce shift, which has been great, is access has never been more important. Access to information, Google reviews, a simplified process. And I think throughout the entire supply chain, the retail point being no different, it certainly accelerated the needs and forced us in our industry, which traditionally has been a little slower to adapt, to accelerate that. And I think it's been for the better, certainly.
Very good. And Ezer, how is that impacting manufacturing?
As a manufacturer, again, it gives us the ability to almost interface with the user. So again, elevating the user experience. As a manufacturer, you spend a lot of time training a lot of people. And I think that this facilitates that, providing the data that I spoke about earlier, the enriched data, the features, the benefits, the aces, the pies, all of that. I think takes some pressure off of the face-to-face training, if you will, because it provides the data right there in the face of the user or the consumer. So I think that it gives us the ability to educate our customers. It's going to be more about it. It changes the decision paradigm, I believe, by having visual of the content, what's going to be coming out of the box, and really a win-win for the industry. So it's quite exciting.
On that topic, I know a lot of people have looked at the evolution of e-commerce, specifically in the province of Québec. Alors, je suis curieux un peu, Michael, de savoir comment se fait cette transition vers le commerce électronique au Québec. Est-ce qu'il y a des différences qu'on retrouve au Québec?
Je vais répondre en anglais et français, mais simplement, pour la plupart, je pense que oui, en général, c'est la même. Chaque juridiction au Canada est unique, mais il y a beaucoup de choses au Québec qui sont très uniques. And I really do feel the pace of change and the adoption of the technology in e-commerce in Quebec, referencing our business, was actually faster than other parts of the country. Can't pinpoint the reasons why, but certainly what we noticed is our interaction with our customers through our e-commerce platforms throughout the pandemic was much, much quicker in the province of Quebec. Now, each jurisdiction, of course, in Canada, as I mentioned, is different based on the demographics. So I certainly respect and understand every part of our great country here in Canada has different rates in adoption of different changes, but we certainly saw it was much, much quicker in Quebec, which is terrific. We've actually used that as a beachhead for the rest of our operations and how to adopt and roll out different programs from the e-commerce side of things. So interesting that you asked the question, because it directly coincides with our experience on the retail side as well.
Thank you, Michael. It's interesting to hear your perspective on the differences that you've seen in the Quebec market versus the rest of Canada. And I'm just curious on Canada compared to the US. Ezer, what is your perspective from a supplier's perspective?
Yeah, so what we've seen is obviously the lockdowns on the Canadian side and the restrictions have really slowed us down here. The US economy, as many of us know, has recovered a lot faster than on this side. In fact, the second half of 2020 was very robust. Canada, we saw obviously a terrific recovery, but not to the extent that they did see in the US. And starting with Q1 this year, the US is very robust. The aftermarket is, and many of us have been on various webinars of industry experts, and that we're seeing it in our business, where Canada's been a little bit slower to recover. So that's really what we have seen. And again, I think it's driven by vaccinations, or the rate of vaccinations, the lockdowns, the third wave that we're in, again, both, I know in Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, has made it very tough, very tough. Can't wait for the vaccinations to get into, higher mode and help us all. But that's really largely what we've seen, Susan.
Thank you.
So just from my perspective on some of that between Canada and the United States, I've always noticed the big differences is that there's about 55 million people on some sort of social assistance in the United States. So the Canadian aftermarket has been more leaning to, most of us on this call, on the professional side of the business. What I see is the tax incentives drive a lot of people to go into the stores in the United States, and it's less of a marketplace issue for us here in Canada. We're seeing more of that bounce from the professional side of the business, but I see more of that just driven on the everyday street of people coming into the stores in the United States. That's, to me, is one of the prime differences, along with, obviously, as Ezer says, these lockdowns that are continuing along and the lack of vaccines that are apparent in our country right now. Mm-hmm. Michael, how about you?
Yeah, no, I echo certainly, Steve, and what Ezer had mentioned. Our business obviously operates in both countries, and I would call it the economic recovery is certainly more prevalent in the U.S. due to a variety of factors. Two key metrics in our business that matter, and really across the entire automotive aftermarket, are vehicle miles traveled, or kilometers traveled, but in the U.S. miles traveled, and congestion miles. So as we've seen VMT recover in the U.S. fairly steadily and at a higher and quicker rate than in Canada because of various reasons, we've seen our business recover at a different pace. Certainly the congestion part of things, which has a direct impact on collision rates, has also steadily increased in parallel with VMT increase in the US. So those two key phenomena have driven the US marketplace, and we can see it across all retail sectors, just to be a little bit further along in terms of the recovery. Also to further points, there's various tax stimulus initiatives that have just pumped a lot of money into the retail sector within the US that's propped up the economy most recently, especially. So we're very optimistic and very confident that the Canadian business will recover at the same level as the US for sure. And I mean that overall within the automotive aftermarket, not just my business in itself. and it'll kind of run in parallel. What we've historically seen is also consolidation and different acquisitions after some of these economic changes start to really accelerate. And we're seeing that across the supply chain in the US as well. And I think that'll eventually return here, and we'll see more M&A across the automotive aftermarket as well in Canada.
I'm always intrigued to see how much, we have so much in common with our friends and cousins from the US, but at the same time, very unique differences also that applies here in Canada. We're seeing, obviously, from a US perspective, a continued social movement that continues to expand. We know here in Canada, the government just tabled its latest budget that really talks about resiliency, but also inclusiveness, right, as part of the recovery post-COVID. So we're more than ever looking at the dynamics of diversity, inclusivity. So do we need to talk about this more here in Canada than is going on in the US? What do you think, Ezer?
I absolutely think so. We absolutely need to talk about it more. I know for us, our culture has been founded on diversity and inclusion, but having said that, we need to do more. I think it starts with acknowledgement. For us, we have to communicate a lot more. And at the end of the day, I think we have to follow it with action. So we did witness some events on both sides of the borders, more so on the US side, of course, that have raised awareness, raised questions, made all of us question how we run our businesses. And I think it's up to all of us to respond in an inclusive manner and address the issues that we've been witnessing the last year. We need to celebrate it. Maybe that's the point I should make too. It needs to be celebrated, and it shouldn't just be a policy. It needs to be part of our real life, day-to-day life.
And celebrate the positives of it and the benefits to your business to be diverse. I think that needs to be outlined a little bit more too. I heard a shocking statistic the other day on another webinar for a different sort of association. But the shocking statistic was that women are exiting the workforce at 10 times the rate of men in the past 12 months during COVID, particularly because of the childcare challenges that families are experiencing. So how do we recover from that in a predominantly male industry? And how do you see us moving forward, and are we doing enough? Steve?
Oh, I think the short answer for sure is we are not doing enough. That's being abundantly clear, I think, right across all organizations, including the automotive aftermarket. It's kind of doing the right thing, and I think that's kind of making this percolate up more and more inside of organizations, which is it's not just the right thing to do, but there's also a business case to be made that says you are missing out on a segment that's growing your business. And so if you're missing out on that segment, how are you going to keep continually growing your business without diversity inside the workplace? So it's not just women, but certainly everybody inclusive of that. So we run org health surveys inside of our organization, and this one's been percolating up to the point which is we've actually opened up an office of diversity inside of our own organization for not only diversity, but equality, inclusion inside of there, just to get everybody involved into it. I think, I was reading something the other day in regards to the Oscars. They were talking about the Hollywood industry is losing $10 billion of opportunity because of a lack of diversity. And I think very similar to that is companies right across North America are cluing into the fact that we have to do something about it. Now, traditionally, our business isn't designed as the male-dominated one. The people say it's not sexy. Really, it's what we put into it. So for ourselves at CARQUEST, we have to spend a lot more time on this, and we are setting goals inside of our organization for our teams to get involved in it as well. Michael, how about your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Steve, well said. Great to hear, obviously, what you guys are doing over at CARQUEST. And I think it's an important topic, and I'm super proud and happy that it is certainly on this panel. And quality, diversity across the board really transcends borders. I don't think it's a U.S. conversation, a Canadian conversation. It's truly global. And Unfortunately, one of the great challenges that's come through, it's highlighted a lot of the unique challenges many demographics have due to the pandemic. They just highlighted that. Now, bringing that back to our industry, I think we all benefit by everybody being treated more equal and presenting opportunities to everyone, regardless of age or gender, whatever the case may be. And one great example of what we're trying to do within our business is March was, Women's History Month. So we were very purposeful in profiling the successful female entrepreneurs and business leaders across our organization, and many other great organizations. Our competitors did the exact same, which is terrific to showcase the great opportunities that lie within the automotive aftermarket. And there's some great associations focusing on the gender side of things that can also help the win across collision and so forth. So there's tools, there's programs, there's platforms. We need to shout from the rooftops, how open, diverse, and we need to change the dialogue. And I don't think it has any bearing on where you live. Everybody deserves to be certainly treated equally. And I think the fact that we're having this open conversation even here just speaks to the great work that you guys have done through the AIA to make sure that this is brought forward and spoken about solutions. So kudos to the entire team for that.
Thank you very much, Michael. There's no question that the association continue to be very much involved in representing our industry. And when you talk to government, the issue of inclusiveness and diversity always comes up. And we've had programs such as Awake in past years that really focused on trying to bring quality workforce to the automotive aftermarket. And I think we need to look at a very diverse workforce and be able to recruit from a wide, diverse workforce. But it requires, obviously, I think our own members to invest, be aware, and be proactive on the topic. And we're here to support, obviously. When we talk to government, not only do we talk about diversity, but we also talk about the impact of technology. Part of the recent budget also included a focus by the federal government to accelerate the adoptions of zero-emission vehicle or EVs. And so there's another dynamic that's important to acknowledge in the aftermarket. And I'm really curious to hear from the supply chain perspective, how are we adapting to those new realities, the new drivetrain, the hybrids, the EVs? Steve, can you tell us a bit from the distribution network, what's happening in that regards?
Sure. Thanks. When you think about this as the aftermarket and certainly more the parts side of things, it's a little bit slower to adopt. Michael's business, when there's a crash on a vehicle and they have the ADAS systems in there, they're involved in that today. Typically, we wait until the vehicle gets into our sweet spot to react to some of this stuff. And sometimes if we're not forward thinking of this, we're going to miss out on a true opportunity for our business. And I think about just returns of just the batteries. When you think of an EV vehicle, you're thinking about the battery. And I can tell you in the last 12 months, the sales of the AGM battery has grown exponentially again because of the start-stop technology. And that really started in probably 2013 when that happened. And so now everyone's talking about the AGM battery. And of course, the AGM battery is a lot more expensive than just a regular flooded battery. So there's a great opportunity in itself. And then you think down the road where this is coming back into us with the cell batteries for the EV batteries. These are going to present a little bit of a different challenge between just a flooded battery versus an AGM. These are a lot larger battery in itself. So you've got to think about how do you transport that battery to an ultimate customer? Most of us have transitioned over the years from driving pickup trucks as delivery vehicles to maybe having one pickup truck in the fleet to having more cars. Ourselves, we have 76% of what we sell is less than 1 foot cube. So it makes sense, except when it comes to an EV battery. And then all of a sudden you've got a different shelf life. Some of these EV batteries that you'll buy have got a 3-month shelf life before they need to be recharged. So if they're going to be sitting in your distribution center, you have to have the full infrastructure for doing that. If you're going to transport that to the ultimate place of installation, the TDG that we live and breathe by, thanks to AIA, is pretty well going to go out the window. Now we're going to have to talk about placarding vehicles, training people in specific ways. Think about safety protocols, not only for the battery itself, but lifting the battery, transporting the battery. And you think about the other things that are involved in that too. You're thinking about the core charges. I mean, the core charge on a regular battery is one thing, but a core charge on one of these batteries is something else. So, you know, are we going to morph into something like a drop shipment program on these onto these batteries? We've seen some of that happen before in the paint industry. I mean, when we went to waterborne, we had to change our fleet for delivery from the distribution center to having something so that the waterborne paint wouldn't freeze. And very similar to this, we need to be thinking about that, but we can't wait for that to happen and start getting the phone calls. We have to get proactive about that. I think the other thing that emerges from this too is because it's a large ticket sale, and that we're seeing other people emerge into this industry saying, well, we're not into the regular flooded batteries or the AGM batteries, but certainly these EV batteries present an opportunity for us to be involved in that marketplace. We want to get involved into that. So you're seeing more and more players get into that. And it's a potentially large sale that nobody wants to avoid getting for sure. So it's the opportunity ahead of us, and how do we adjust along the way. So we've got to prepare for that before it shows up on our doorstep.
Well, that is so interesting, Steve. Thank you so much. Well said. And what about the skill set of the people who are going to install these or fix the cars with EV technology? Are we ready for it, and how do we get ready? Michael?
You know, great question. And I love Steve's mention of the waterborne example, obviously being the retail side. We face that head on with our partners. And I think there's an old saying that kind of comes to mind, you know, with change comes challenge and opportunity. And that was, you know, one great reference. And I think today with EV and really any technology around the construct of the vehicle, that certainly requires different repair methodologies, different techniques, and so on. The industry is never prepared enough. I think that goes without saying, just because of the constant pace of change. But I think we have a extremely robust workforce that has adapted for decades now here in Canada, really across North America, to the changing needs of the vehicle. And the EV side of things is important, perhaps even of equal relevance, is the requirement for calibration, scanning, diagnostics related to the vehicle repair, particularly on the collision side, but also repair and maintenance, where there's a much more, I guess, IT need than just repairing the panel, so to speak, or replacing a panel on a car. There's a technological component to the repairs that really hasn't been seen to the level that it is today ever in the history of our business. And so that need for training, for certification, referencing certainly obviously what the AIA is doing through CCIF and CCIAP and so forth, and partnering across the entire sector to ensure that we're, as much as we possibly can, ahead of, we don't have the car coming in without knowing how to fix it. We're ahead of that, essentially. And we rely on the industry really to help us get there. No one individual group or entity will be able to do that. And the same reference to the waterborne paint change we did several years ago. So the skill set is certainly there. The training is definitely needed. As much information and access to information, of course, is extremely critical. And I wouldn't just segment it directly to EVs. It's across the entire technological change of the vehicle that we need to make sure we're fixing cars properly. We have access to the right supply chain to fix them in a timely manner, and we can get individuals back on the road safely, working with our partners. But it starts and ends with the individuals, the great individuals that fix the vehicles day in and day out within our organization and across the board.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer on the whole aspect of the change and impact of technology. Before we close, I'd like to get a bit of each of you, your perspective, your personal perspective, looking into 2022 in terms of the overall, feel for how do you feel the aftermarket is going to do in Canada in 2022? Overall, are you optimistic for the future? Are you pessimistic? What do you see ahead? And we'll start with Ezer here from a perspective of a manufacturer.
Well, as far as 2022, in one word, very optimistic. I believe 2022 and probably the back half of this year will be very robust on the Canadian side. There's no reason for the business here not to be robust as we're seeing on the US side. That's number one. I think there's going to be a lot of tailwind from the e-commerce side. What we hear and see statistics about the sweet spot, the VIOs in the sweet spot are continuing to grow. And I think that's going to generate more demand. And going back to the user experience and the digital aspect, I think is also going to generate more ancillary sales, where users will be able to look up what other components they require and increase the dollar ticket of that purchase. These are probably just more tailwinds, but I do see a robust, not just recovery, but a very robust 2022 for the industry in Canada. Very optimistic about it. We also heard a stat that used car sales are up 60% as a result of COVID. Obviously, that's impacting the industry in a big way, and I'm sure we're going to see that continue to perpetuate demand.
Right. As there's no question, we've been monitoring the impact of shortages, right, on the front of automakers, and so it's definitely driving some of these used car sales. So this is a good, again, indicator for, I guess, the industry. Steve, from your perspective, what do you see about 2022? Are you optimistic?
Yeah, so this is very similar for us. I mean, we're seeing the shortage of used car market out there, so it's continuing to drive the demand. That's the opportunity for us. I think the really interesting thing for us is that the innovation that's going on that we're talking about with EVs and just what we've had to manage to do throughout the pandemic is that there's opportunities that are still in the stage of working on for everybody that we have yet to kind of enact. So we're on this journey, but we seem to have sped up in the last 14 months. And I see that inertia is going to continue to pile on for us. Kilometers driven is rising. The OEs will get back to selling cars. We'll continue to grow the number of VIOs that are out there. So that's always promising for the auto industry itself. And I'm thinking that 2022 and beyond for us is going to be very robust and looking forward to it. I always tell our team, when you get up in the morning and your feet hit the floor, you have to have a mission in state. And because of all these things that have gone on with COVID, there's still lots of opportunities that we can still expand upon. So looking forward to it. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, nothing that has been said that I don't that I agree, that I don't disagree with, or I do agree with, which is awesome. And I would just add one word: our industry is resilient. We always have been across the automotive aftermarket, certainly here in Canada. So I see no reason why that resilience won't just transfer into optimism across the board. So absolutely, we feel very excited about what there is to come in the future.
Thank you, Michael. Before we just close, I know there's a questions in the Q&A. I just can't get to it. I'm not sure if Larissa can help me in the back here. Sorry, I just can't do it. No, unfortunately, we had a question from the audience, and we'll make sure to share the question with the panelists, get their answer, and share it back with the group. So I'll turn it back over for Susan for a closing statement.
JF, I just found that question online here. It says, the rapid adoption of technologies for the aftermarket in both commerce and repair has the potential to change the image of the industry. What impact might this have on aftermarket recruitment? And this is from Andrew Ross. Who would like to start with that? How about Michael?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it'll certainly help. Like as I mentioned, the technology and the needs of the vehicle in today's repair are much different in the sense of related to technology, computer diagnostics, calibrations, and scanning has essentially changed the way we fix cars in our industry, anyways, which one would assume fits right in with the tech savvy youngsters that are coming up through the ranks today. So I think the real challenge is going to be getting that message out. Other trades do a fantastic job of promoting the skilled labor opportunities, whether it be electrical, plumbing, and so forth. I think that's a big initiative for us across the industry, is to really attract that next generation of skilled tradespeople, and understanding that it's not your everyday aftermarket anymore. And due to technologies, it's right up the alley of that next generation of worker, so to speak.
Thank you, Michael. And I think I'm just going to add 2 cents on that. I think that recruitment is also, for our industry, very important to recruit and call for people who are interested in a career rather than a job, and people who are interested in a profession rather than a simple skilled trade. Not to call it simple, but that this is a professional trade that they're entering. And I think we need to really promote that in our industry. Well, I was really encouraged by your last comments from all of our panelists on the future outlook of the automotive aftermarket in Canada. That's really, really exciting to hear your positivity on that. And we've covered some very important topics today, and I hope that the conversation continues amongst all of our members on these topics, and that we continue to bring them to the forefront of our membership in the association. I'd like to thank our panelists today for contributing, Michael, Ezer, and Steve. Thank you for your contribution to AIA and for volunteering your time. We really do appreciate it and appreciate your insights. And thank you to our audience for tuning in and for joining us. I hope to see you soon at a live event. Have a great day.